You know, it's wild to think about how a simple signature on a check, something we do without a second thought, can explode into a massive legal battle. Today, we're cracking open a fascinating case file to figure out a really tough question. When fraud happens, who actually pays the price? So let's jump right in. We're starting with a real court case that's just full of drama. And interestingly enough, it all begins not in some criminal underworld, but right inside a family home. All right, so here's the setup. We have a man, Mr. Greenwood, and one day he makes a pretty awful discovery. His wife has been forging his signature on his checks and taking money from his bank account. Now, he knows what's going on. But instead of calling the bank, he decides to handle it privately. He keeps quiet. And that one decision, to say absolutely nothing, is the heart of our entire mystery. Who's on the hook for the stolen money? Is it the bank, who failed to catch the fake signature? Or is it the customer, who knew about the crime and stayed silent? Okay, before we can figure out who's to blame in our case, we need to get our terms straight. You'll hear people throw around the words fraud and forgery like they're the same thing, but trust me, in the world of law, they are completely different animals.
So forgery is super specific. It's all about the document. Think of it as creating a physical lie. That fake signature on a check, that's forgery. You're creating a false instrument to try and get a legal leg up.
Fraud, on the other hand, is the bigger picture. It's the whole act of deception, the scheme to trick someone into an agreement. So you could say that a forged check is just one of the tools someone might use to commit fraud. Forgery is the weapon, fraud is the crime itself. So let's lock this in. Forgery is about the object, the phony check, the altered contract. Fraud is about the action, the trickery, the deception, the whole dishonest plan that ends up hurting someone. And this isn't just theory. The courts have a literal checklist. A really important case, Manopa v. Ramapa, laid it all out. To prove fraud, you need to show three things. There was deceit, it was done in secret, and it caused or could have caused real harm. All right, so we've got the concepts down. Now let's look at the official rulebook. When a judge is looking at a case like Mr. Greenwood's, this is the exact text they're going to pull up. In Indian law, everything comes back to Section 17 of the Contract Act. This is the bedrock. It literally defines what the law considers to be a fraudulent act. This is ground zero for these kinds of cases. And just look at how wide-ranging this definition is. Fraud isn't just telling a flat-out lie. The law says it's also about actively hiding the truth or making a promise you have zero intention of keeping. Basically, any clever trick designed to deceive someone falls under this umbrella. Okay, so with those legal rules in our back pocket, let's get back to the main event, the blame game. When a bank cashes a forged check, who ends up holding the bag? Let's see what precedent tells us. This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, you'd think so, right? Banks are supposed to be the experts at verifying signatures. So if they get it wrong, it should be their problem. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. So the starting point for the law is pretty straightforward. A forgery is a nullity, which is just a fancy legal way of saying it's completely worthless. It's as if the signature never existed. The general rule, then, is that if a bank pays out on a worthless document, that loss is on them. But, and this is a really big but, that's not where the story ends. The law also asks, well, did the customer do something that helped cause the problem? This is where things get really interesting, and where we start to see some major exceptions to the rule. Okay, check out these two cases. In one, a customer's checkbook gets stolen. In the other, a company hires a secretary who they know has a forgery conviction, and, surprise, she forges checks. Now, you think the customer was being negligent, right? But the court said, nope. They ruled that even if the customers were a bit careless, their actions didn't directly make the forgery possible. The final responsibility to spot the fake signature was still on the bank. But then came the case that changed everything, Canara Bank v. Canara Sales Corp. This was a landmark. The court created a huge exception. It said the bank can get off the hook, but only if it can prove two things. One, the customer knew about the forgery, and two, they did absolutely nothing about it. That combination, knowledge plus an action, is a total game changer. And that brings us right back to Mr. Greenwood, our guy who knew his wife was forging checks but kept it to himself. Now that we have all the legal pieces, let's finally see how the court put the puzzle together. The final verdict was a stunner. The court ruled against Mr. Greenwood. He, the customer, the victim of the forgery, was the one held responsible for all the losses, not the bank.
So why? What was the logic? Well, it wasn't about the forgery itself. It was about his silence. The court established this really important idea. When you find out you're a victim of forgery, you have an immediate duty to disclose. You have to tell the bank. And by staying quiet, Mr. Greenwood broke that duty.
This is such a powerful idea. The court's ruling basically said that by knowing what was happening and letting it continue, his silence made him complicit. It was as if he was a party to the whole thing. He stopped the bank from protecting itself, and because of that, all the responsibility shifted from them straight to him.
And this leaves us with a really important thought for today. Remember, this case happened long before smartphones and instant bank alerts. In a world where your bank can text you the second a weird charge hits your account, that duty to disclose is more real and more immediate than ever. The lesson from Mr. Greenwood's silence is crystal clear. When it comes to your money, you are always the first line of defense.